The elevator doors opened to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that screams something is wrong. Our penthouse should have been filled with catering staff preparing for tonight's anniversary party. Instead, I found Derek's suitcases lined up by the door like soldiers awaiting orders. 3 matching Louis Vuitton pieces I'd given him last Christmas, now packed and ready to abandon me. I set down the anniversary gift I'd been carrying, a vintage Patek Philippe watch I'd hunted down for 6 months. My hands were steady. That's what 10 years of hiding who you really are teaches you, control. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Derek? My voice echoed through $40 million worth of Manhattan real estate. My real estate. But he didn't know that. He emerged from our bedroom, and he wasn't alone. She was tall, blonde, dripping in Cartier, wearing confidence like a second skin. The kind of woman who makes other women feel small just by existing. Her heels clicked against my Italian marble floors with the rhythm of ownership. Sophia, Derek said, and I noted the guilt in his voice was minimal. We need to talk. On our anniversary? I kept my tone soft, bewildered. Playing the role I'd perfected over our entire marriage, the struggling artist who'd married up, grateful for Derek's financial support. The woman laughed, a crystalline sound that probably cost thousands in vocal coaching. How delightfully dramatic. Derek, darling, shall I wait in the car? No. Derek's jaw set with newfound courage. The kind men get when they think they've traded up. Victoria should hear this from both of us. Victoria. She knew my name. How thoughtful. I'm Isabelle Lecroix, the woman announced, extending a hand weighted down with diamonds. You've probably seen me in Forbes. Lecroix Enterprises? We just closed a deal in Singapore worth more than most people make in 10 lifetimes. I shook her hand, noting the firm grip designed to intimidate. I'm sorry, I don't really follow business news. I'm more into art. The pity in her eyes was exactly what I'd aimed for. Perfect. Sophia, I'm leaving you, Derek said, and I watched him stand straighter, emboldened by his billionaire girlfriend's presence. I should have done this years ago. We've grown apart. You've been content to coast on your little gallery job while I've been building my career. Our career, darling, Isabelle interrupted, sliding her arm through his. Derek's been absolutely wasted at his current firm. Once he joins Lecroix Enterprises as my chief investment officer, he'll finally reach his potential. I blinked, letting confusion cloud my features. But Derek, you're an account manager at Riverside Financial. Since when do you know about investments? His face flushed. Even Isabelle looked momentarily uncomfortable. That's exactly what I mean, Derek snapped, recovering. You've never believed in me. Never seen my potential. Isabelle does. She's offering me a position making $3 million a year. Plus equity, Isabelle added, her smile sharp. Derek's brilliance has been buried under mediocrity for too long. Unlike you, Sophia, I recognize talent when I see it. I let my eyes well up. Not hard, I'd been practicing this conversation in my head for 3 months, ever since my security team first reported Derek's affair. But, our home. Our life. I thought you loved me. This isn't your home, Derek said coldly. It's a rental. A very expensive rental that's been draining my savings for years. Isabelle's offered to let me move into her penthouse in Tribeca. Her actual penthouse that she owns. 40 million, Isabelle said casually. Though honestly, in today's market, it's worth at least 60. The views alone. We're leasing this place? I interrupted, letting my voice crack. But you said, you told me you owned it. Derek had the decency to look away. I never said I owned it. You assumed. The lease is in the corporation's name. Sterling Holdings LLC, Isabel supplied helpfully. I looked into it. Some anonymous investment group. They own half the luxury properties in Manhattan, apparently. Charge criminal amounts in rent, too. Honestly, Sophia, you'll be better off. Derek said you've been living beyond your means for years. I watched Derek nod along, rewriting our history with every bob of his head. The struggling artist narrative had worked perfectly. For 10 years, I'd played the role of grateful wife, blessed to live in luxury she couldn't afford, supported by her hard-working husband. The truth was infinitely more interesting. So you're just leaving? I whispered. Tonight? On our anniversary? The lease ends next month anyway, Derek said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. I wasn't going to renew it. This place costs $30,000 a month, Sophia. $30,000. I can't keep supporting this lifestyle. $35,000, actually. But who was counting? I've arranged for movers to come next week, Isabel said, checking her phone with practiced boredom. They'll pack your things, Sophia. I'm sure Derek will be generous with the division of assets. Her tone suggested she doubted there were many assets to divide. I don't understand, I said, sinking onto the couch. My couch, custom-made in Italy, shipped across an ocean. Why tonight? Why now? Because Isabel's throwing me a party, Derek announced, and there was that pride again, that puffed-up masculine energy that comes from being claimed by a woman he perceives as powerful. At her estate in the Hamptons. Business associates, celebrities, people who actually matter. She's introducing me to her world. I wanted to do this cleanly, Isabel added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You seem like a sweet girl, Sophia. Limited, certainly, but sweet. You'll land on your feet. Maybe move back in with your parents? Get a roommate? There's no shame in living within your means. Limited. The word hung in the air like a challenge. I stood slowly, wiping imaginary tears from my eyes. Can I have tonight? To process this? You can leave in the morning. Please, Derek. One last night in our home. Derek looked at Isabel, seeking permission. She checked her watch, Patek Philippe, I noted. Last year's model. How quaint. We have that dinner reservation, Isabel said. And the helicopter to the Hamptons leaves at midnight. She studied me with the interest one might give a curiosity in a museum. But I suppose one more night won't hurt. Derek can collect his things tomorrow. Thank you, I whispered. As they walked toward the elevator, Derek carrying the lightest of his suitcases, Isabel turned back. Oh, and Sophia? The watch? The anniversary gift? She pointed to the box I'd set down. Derek won't be needing it. I've already given him his gift. She tilted Derek's wrist, revealing a Richard Mille worth at least $800,000. The elevator doors closed on Derek's uncomfortable expression and Isabel's triumphant smile. I waited exactly 30 seconds. Then I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park and pulled out my phone. Marcus, I said when my head of security answered. They just left. Is the tracker active on his suitcase? Active and transmitting, Ms. Reeves. We'll have eyes on them all evening. Ms. Reeves. My real name. The one Derek had never learned. I pulled up the video feed from the elevator. Watched Derek and Isabel descend, already laughing about something. About me, probably. The poor, delusional artist who thought she belonged in their world. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Julian, my attorney. I take it tonight's the night? His British accent carried amusement. He's gone. She's exactly as insufferable as advertised. And the lease? She mentioned Sterling Holdings by name. has no idea who actually owns it. Julian's laugh was sharp. Oh, this is going to be delicious. When do you want me to move forward? Give them the weekend. Let them enjoy the Hamptons. Let Derek settle into his new life. Let Isabel parade him around her party like a prize. I paused, watching the city lights flicker to life below. Then we begin. The contracts are ready. The moment she signs the renewal papers on Monday, she'll learn exactly who her landlord is, I finished. And Derek will learn what his wife actually does for a living. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine, a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild from my personal cellar. The cellar Derek thought belonged to the building. Everything in this penthouse, from the art on the walls to the marble in the bathrooms, belonged to me. Purchased through my network of holding companies, installed before Derek and I even met. I'd bought this building 12 years ago, fresh out of Harvard Business School, using the trust fund my grandmother left me as seed money. While my classmates were climbing corporate ladders, I was building my own empire. Quietly. Carefully. Behind layers of LLCs and anonymous trusts. Sterling Holdings was just one of 47 companies I owned. Together, they controlled a real estate portfolio worth north of $3 billion. The penthouse Derek was abandoning? It was my crown jewel, my home, my sanctuary. I'd designed every detail. And I'd let him live here, under the fiction that he was supporting me, because I needed to see who he really was. Not the man who courted Sophia Reeves, the artist. But the man who would live with her once he thought he had the upper hand. Tonight's revelation hadn't surprised me. I'd known about Isabel for months. Known about the affair, the promises she'd made, the future she'd painted. My team had compiled a thorough dossier. Isabel Lecroix, self-proclaimed billionaire, was worth approximately $40 million. Impressive by most standards. Laughable by mine. More interesting was how she'd made that money. Her father's company, which she'd inherited and promptly run into the ground. The Singapore deal, she'd mentioned. A desperate attempt to stave off bankruptcy by selling off the company's last valuable assets. Lecroix Enterprises was a house of cards, and Isabel was praying no one looked too closely at the foundation. But I had looked. Very closely. And what I'd found was delicious. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from my CFO, Rebecca. The Lecroix financials just came through. It's worse than we thought. She's leveraged to the teeth. 3 months from insolvency. I smiled, texting back, perfect. Prepare the acquisition papers. Another text came through, this one from Marcus, they're at Le Bernardin. Should we maintain surveillance? Every word. Every gesture. I want documentation of everything. Setting my phone down, I walked through my penthouse, my actual penthouse, trailing my fingers along surfaces Derek had touched without knowing they belonged to me. The kitchen where he'd criticized my cooking while eating meals prepared by my private chef. The study where he'd worked on his presentations for Riverside Financial, never noticing the real financial documents I kept hidden in the walls. The bedroom where he'd made love to me with decreasing enthusiasm, probably already dreaming of Isabel's bed. Tomorrow, they'd be in the Hamptons. Derek would be introduced to Isabel's world, a world built on credit, loans, and increasingly desperate financial maneuvering. He'd shake hands with people who smiled to their faces while privately knowing Lecroix Enterprises was circling the drain. In 3 days, Isabel would sign the lease renewal papers for this penthouse, locking herself into another year at $35,000 per month. Money she didn't have. Money she'd be borrowing against her company's rapidly dwindling assets. She'd sign those papers as my tenant, never knowing her landlord's identity. And then, piece by piece, I would dismantle the fantasy she'd sold Derek. First, I'd acquire Lecroix Enterprises. Anonymously, through a shell company, making an offer she couldn't refuse because she'd be drowning in debt. By the time she realized what was happening, I'd own everything she'd promised Derek. Second, I'd call in this lease. There was a clause, buried in the fine print her lawyers had somehow missed, allowing the landlord to terminate with 30 days' notice if the property was needed for personal use. This was personal use. Third, and this was my favorite part, I'd let Derek's career at Riverside Financial implode naturally. My investigators had uncovered some interesting discrepancies in his accounts. Small embezzlements, nothing major, but enough to get him fired once I made an anonymous tip to compliance. The chief investment officer position Isabel had promised him? That would evaporate the moment I owned her company and immediately dissolved that role. I'd leave them with nothing. Not because I was cruel, but because they needed to understand something fundamental: actions have consequences. Humiliation has a price. And underestimating your opponent is the most expensive mistake you can make. My phone rang. My mother this time. "Darling, your assistant said tonight was the anniversary party. I brought champagne." Her voice was bright, unaware of the evening's developments. "Change of plans, Mom. Come up anyway. We're celebrating something different." "Oh? What's that?" I looked around my penthouse, my empire, my carefully constructed world that Derek had just walked away from without ever knowing what he was leaving behind. "Freedom," I said. "We're celebrating freedom." The weekend passed in a blur of surveillance footage and strategic planning. My team worked overtime, compiling evidence, preparing documents, building the case for what was to come. Saturday afternoon, I watched Derek at Isabel's Hamptons estate through long-range cameras. The property was impressive, old money aesthetics with new money desperation. The party was everything Isabel had promised: celebrities, business moguls, politicians. Derek moved through the crowd with the eager energy of someone who thought he'd finally arrived. Isabel kept her hand on his arm, claiming him, presenting him to her guests as her brilliant new discovery. I watched him nod along as she introduced him as her chief investment officer, a title he hadn't actually accepted yet because the company hadn't technically offered it yet. Details, apparently, that didn't matter to Isabel. "She's telling everyone he closed the Singapore deal," Marcus reported via our encrypted line. "Giving him credit for her father's work. Document everything. Every lie. Every embellishment." Sunday morning brought an interesting development. Derek tried calling me 3 times. I let it go to voicemail, listening later to his awkward messages about checking in and making sure you're okay. The guilt was setting in. Good. Isabel's social media was a carefully curated story of their weekend. Photos of her and Derek on the beach, at dinner, laughing with beautiful people in beautiful clothes. The narrative was clear: Isabel Lecroix had upgraded. Found a man worthy of her success and sophistication. The comments were predictable. Congratulations mixed with curiosity about who this handsome mystery man was. Isabel responded selectively, hinting at his important role in her business, his brilliant mind, their shared vision for the future. She was building his public profile. Smart. It would make the fall more spectacular. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a well-aimed missile. At 9 a.m., Isabel's assistant called the property management company for Sterling Holdings LLC to confirm the lease renewal appointment. At 9:30 a.m., my CFO initiated a margin call on 3 of Lecroix Enterprises' outstanding loans my bank had quietly purchased the rights to over the past 2 months. At 10 a.m., Isabel arrived at the Sterling Holdings office to sign her lease renewal, Derek by her side. My team had arranged for me to observe via closed-circuit camera, watching from my penthouse as they sat in the conference room. "The renewal terms are standard," the property manager explained, sliding papers across the table. $35,000 per month, with the usual clauses regarding maintenance, insurance, and early termination. Early termination? Isabel barely glanced at the papers. I don't plan on leaving. This property is perfect for my needs. It's just a standard clause, Ms. Lecroix. Allows the owner to reclaim the property with 30 days' notice under specific circumstances. What circumstances? Derek asked, playing the protective boyfriend. Personal use, primarily. But it's rarely invoked. The owner has multiple properties and hasn't needed to use this clause in the building's history. Who is the owner? Isabel asked casually, pen poised over signature line. Sterling Holdings maintains the privacy of its ownership structure. But I can assure you, they're a very hands-off landlord. You'll likely never interact with them directly. Isabel signed with a flourish. Derek signed as co-tenant, cementing his legal responsibility for a lease he couldn't afford. Welcome home, the property manager said, collecting the papers. From my penthouse, I smiled. Welcome home indeed. At 11 a.m., my legal team filed paperwork revealing my identity as the majority owner of Sterling Holdings LLC. Public record, available to anyone who knew where to look. But buried under enough corporate layers that it would take days to untangle. At noon, my CFO's acquisition team approached Lecroix Enterprises with an offer. $20 million for a company worth $40 million on paper, but only if you didn't look at the debt. Given Lecroix's situation, it was actually a generous offer. The alternative was bankruptcy within 90 days. Isabel's lawyers would receive the offer by end of business. They'd spend the evening trying to figure out who was behind the shell company making the acquisition bid, trying to find leverage or alternatives. They wouldn't find any. I'd made sure of that. At 2 p.m., an anonymous tip was sent to Riverside Financial's compliance department. Details of Derek's account irregularities, complete with transaction records and evidence of misappropriation. Small amounts, but consistent. The kind of pattern that suggested systematic theft. At 4 p.m., I received confirmation that Derek's firm had launched an internal investigation. He'd be suspended pending review by end of week. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. Julian, sounding pleased. The dominoes are falling exactly as planned. Lecroix's lawyers are panicking. They've done the math. They know she has to sell. And Derek? Security badge deactivated an hour ago. He's been asked not to return to the office pending investigation. How long before they connect me to Sterling Holdings? Public records are filed, but the connections are complex. I'd estimate 3 to 4 days before anyone pieces together that you own their penthouse. Another week before they realize you're behind the Lecroix acquisition. Perfect. Let them enjoy their ignorance a little longer. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to my gallery, the small art space in Chelsea where I'd maintained my cover identity for the past decade. It wasn't fake, exactly. I genuinely loved art. But it was also the perfect disguise. The struggling artist persona had made Derek feel secure in his superiority. My gallery manager, Sophie, looked up from the front desk with surprise. Sophia. We weren't expecting you this week. I needed to see the space. How's the new exhibition? Selling well. The emerging artists collection has been getting great coverage. She hesitated. Are you okay? You seem different. Different. Yes. I'd shed a skin this week. Let go of the role I'd been playing. I'm perfect, Sophie. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. How would you feel about becoming sole owner of this gallery? Her eyes widened. What? I don't understand. I'm offering to sell you the gallery. For $1. All you'd have to do is agree to maintain the current artists and continue the mission we've built. But why? This is your passion project. It was my cover, I corrected gently. My real passion is about to consume all my attention. And you've always run this place better than me anyway. Sophie stared, processing. Your cover? Sophia, what do you actually do? I smiled. Let's just say I'm about to be very busy destroying my ex-husband's new life. The gallery deserves someone who can give it full attention. We spent the next hour working out details, with Sophie alternating between shock at my offer and confusion about who I apparently really was. I liked Sophie. She deserved this opportunity. By the time I left, the sun was setting over Manhattan. I walked home, actually walked, something I rarely did. Felt the city pulse around me. Watched people hurrying to their lives, unaware that fortunes were being unmade in boardrooms above their heads. My phone buzzed continuously. Marcus sending updates on Derek and Isabel's increasingly frantic phone calls. Rebecca reporting that Lecroix's lawyers had requested an emergency meeting. Julian confirming that Riverside Financial had officially suspended Derek pending criminal investigation. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. When I reached my building, the doorman greeted me with his usual smile. Good evening, Ms. Reeves. Can I help you with anything? No, thank you, David. Just enjoying the evening. In the elevator, I caught my reflection. Same face, same body, but something had shifted. I'd spent 10 years playing a role, hiding my power, muting my brilliance. For what? To see if Derek would love me for me, rather than what I could provide? The answer had been clear. He'd only loved what he thought I was, someone beneath him, someone grateful for his support, someone who made him feel important. The real me, the CEO, the billionaire, the woman who'd built an empire before she was 30, that version of Sophia Reeves would have terrified him. Good thing he was about to meet her. My penthouse welcomed me with its familiar silence. I poured another glass of wine and settled into the living room, pulling up the surveillance feeds on my tablet. Derek and Isabel were at dinner. Some trendy restaurant in Tribeca, probably trying to maintain normalcy while their worlds crumbled. Derek's phone kept buzzing, probably his lawyer, his now former employer, his increasingly concerned friends who'd heard rumors about the investigation. Isabel was on her phone too, her expression growing more strained with each email from her lawyers. The acquisition offer had shaken her. She was trying to find alternatives, reaching out to old contacts, calling in favors. She'd find none. I'd made sure of that. Marcus, I said into my phone. Status on the Singapore deal? Falling apart. The buyers got wind of Lecroix's financial situation. They're using it to renegotiate terms. Isabel stands to lose at least half the projected revenue. Excellent. And the Hamptons property? Heavily mortgaged. She's 3 months behind on payments. Bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. I swirled my wine, watching Derek through the camera feed. He was talking urgently to Isabel, probably asking what was wrong, why she seemed upset. She was putting on a brave face, reassuring him, maintaining the facade of control. But I could see the cracks forming. The way her smile didn't reach her eyes. The tightness in her shoulders. The frequency with which she checked her phone. She was scared. Good. My phone rang. Unknown number. I debated answering, then decided why not. Hello? Sophia? Derek's voice, uncertain and desperate. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Something's happened, I've been suspended from work. There are accusations, false accusations, about account irregularities. This is insane. I need your help. The irony was delicious. He'd abandoned me 3 days ago, and now he was calling for help. I'm sorry to hear that, Derek. What do you need from me? Could I come by? To talk? Isabel's dealing with some business crisis, and I just need I need someone who knows me to tell me this will be okay. I don't think that's appropriate. You left me, remember? For a billionaire woman who was going to make all your dreams come true. Sophia, please. I made a mistake. I see that now. This whole thing with Isabel, it moved so fast, and I got caught up. But you and I, we have history. We have a foundation. Can't we at least talk? I let the silence stretch, watching him on the feed as he paced outside the restaurant, phone pressed to his ear, desperation written across his face. No, Derek. We can't. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up. On the tablet, I watched him stare at his phone in disbelief. Watched Isabel emerge from the restaurant, asking what was wrong. Watched him shake his head, putting on a brave face, lying about the phone call. They were both trapped in their own lies now. Both drowning in consequences of their choices. And I was just getting started. Tuesday morning brought the beginning of the end. Lecroix Enterprises lawyers called an emergency board meeting. The acquisition offer was on the table, but it came with conditions. Immediate acceptance required. Any delay, and the offer would be withdrawn. Isabel fought it. Spent hours on phone calls, trying to drum up alternative funding, reaching out to old investors. But the market had turned against her. Rumors of her company's instability had spread, carefully planted rumors, I should add. Investors were suddenly unavailable. Banks were suddenly conservative with their lending. By Tuesday afternoon, her options had narrowed to one: accept the acquisition or file for bankruptcy. She accepted. Wednesday morning, the announcement went out. Lecroix Enterprises had been acquired by Meridian Capital Partners, one of my shell companies. Terms undisclosed, but industry insiders immediately understood what had happened. Isabel had sold at a fire sale price. The business press had a field day. Lecroix empire crumbles, read one headline. From heiress to sellout, the fall of Isabel Lecroix, read another. Her social media went silent. The carefully curated life she'd been broadcasting evaporated overnight. Derek, meanwhile, was formally terminated from Riverside Financial. The investigation had uncovered enough evidence to justify dismissal, though they'd decided not to press criminal charges. A professional mercy killing, worse than jail, in some ways. His career was over. His reputation destroyed. Wednesday evening, I received the call I'd been waiting for. Julian, his voice carrying barely suppressed glee. They've figured it out. Just got a very frantic call from Isabel's lawyer. They've traced Sterling Holdings' ownership. They know you own the Penthouse. And? They're requesting a meeting. Tomorrow morning. Both of them want to be there. Tell them I'll meet them at 10 a.m. In the Penthouse. My penthouse. This is going to be spectacular, Julian said. After we hung up, I stood at my windows, looking out over the city I'd conquered while playing the role of struggling artist. Tomorrow, Derek and Isabel would walk into my home, my actual home, and face the reality they'd been too blind to see. I'd spent 10 years hiding my light. Tomorrow, I'd let it shine so bright it would burn away every illusion they'd built about themselves, about me, about the world. Tomorrow, the real revenge began. But tonight, I'd sleep peacefully in my bed, in my penthouse, in my building, secure in the knowledge that every move I'd made had been perfect. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't violent. It isn't cheap or crude. The best revenge is systematic. Calculated. Devastating. The best revenge is watching your enemies realize, far too late, that they never stood a chance. And tomorrow, Derek and Isabel would learn exactly who they'd underestimated. Tomorrow, they'd meet the real Sophia Reeves. Thursday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. I stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city below, when the elevator chimed. I'd given them access, one last time. Derek and Isabel stepped into my penthouse. My actual penthouse. The change in them was immediate. Derek looked haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled. Isabel's designer armor had cracks, her makeup unable to hide the exhaustion, the fear. Sophia, Derek began, then stopped, his eyes scanning the space as if seeing it for the first time. Welcome home, I said, turning to face them. Oh wait. This isn't your home. It's mine. It always has been. Isabel's jaw tightened. We know about Sterling Holdings. We know you own this building. Do you? I walked toward them slowly. Do you know I bought it 12 years ago? That I designed every detail of this penthouse? That for 10 years, Derek lived in my home, spending my money, while mocking my supposed unemployment? Derek's face went white. That's impossible. You're a gallery manager. I'm a billionaire, I corrected. Real estate portfolio worth $3 billion. Sterling Holdings is just one of 47 companies I own. I paused, savoring the moment. By the way, Isabel, how does it feel to lease a penthouse from the woman you called limited? Isabel's composure cracked. You manipulated everything. The acquisition offer, Derek's job, the lease. I documented everything, I interrupted. Your company was already failing. Derek's embezzlement was real. I simply accelerated the inevitable. I pulled out my tablet, showing them surveillance footage from the Hamptons party. Every lie you told about Derek closing the Singapore deal. Every boast about wealth you don't have. Every moment of cruelty you thought went unnoticed. What do you want? Derek asked, his voice breaking. Money? I'll pay you back. Everything. Just please. I don't want your money, Derek. I want you to understand something fundamental. I stepped closer, my voice cold and clear. You had everything. A woman who loved you, a home beyond your wildest dreams, a life of luxury. And you threw it away because you thought you'd found someone better. Someone richer. Someone more powerful. Isabel tried to salvage her dignity. This is harassment. We'll sue for. For what? I laughed. Everything I've done is legal. The acquisition? Fair market offer. The lease termination? Standard contract clause. Derek's termination? His own misconduct. I handed her a folder. These are your eviction papers. 30 days. After that, my legal team will escort you out. Derek sank onto the couch, my couch. Sophia, please. I made a mistake. I see that now. We can fix this. We can. There is no we, Derek. There never was. You married a fantasy, and when reality became inconvenient, you abandoned it for another fantasy. I turned to Isabel. And you saw him as an accessory. Another acquisition to show off. Neither of you saw him as a person. Neither of you saw me as one either. So this is revenge? Isabel spat. Destroying our lives because we fell in love? No, I said softly. This is consequence. You both made choices. Derek chose to embezzle from his company. You chose to run your father's business into the ground while pretending to be a billionaire. I simply provided the spotlight for your failures. I walked to my desk, pulling out 2 envelopes. Derek, inside is a check for $50,000. Enough to start over somewhere else. Consider it severance from our marriage. I slid it across. Isabel, yours contains contact information for companies hiring. Real jobs. Real work. No more pretending. Derek stared at the check, tears streaming down his face. After everything, you're still helping us? I'm not cruel, Derek. I'm just done being underestimated. I headed toward my bedroom, pausing at the door. You have 30 days to vacate. My security will escort you out now. Goodbye. As they stood, broken and humiliated, Isabel turned back one last time. You planned all of this from the beginning? No, I admitted. I hoped you'd prove me wrong. I hoped Derek would choose love over status. That you'd show integrity over image. I met her eyes. You both failed spectacularly. The elevator doors closed on their devastated faces. I stood alone in my penthouse, truly alone for the first time in a decade. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Peaceful. My phone buzzed. Marcus, they're gone. Building security confirms exit. I walked back to my windows, watching the tiny figures on the street below. Derek and Isabel, no longer powerful, no longer pretending. Just two people facing the consequences of believing their own lies. Rebecca texted, Lecroix Enterprises liquidation complete. Assets redistributed to employees. At least something good came from the destruction. Julian called, Riverside Financial dropped all charges against Derek. They want this quiet. Good, I said. Let him rebuild. Away from me. The city sparkled in the morning light. My city. My empire. Built in silence, protected by anonymity, proven through patience. I'd spent 10 years wearing a mask, playing a role, hiding my power. Not anymore. Tomorrow, I'd attend board meetings as myself. Sign contracts with my real name. Walk through my buildings without disguise. The Sophia Reeves who'd cowered under Derek's condescension was gone. The real Sophia Reeves, the one who'd built an empire before 30, who'd outmaneuvered two people who thought themselves untouchable, was finally free. Revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about revelation. Showing people who they really were when stripped of pretense, money, and power. Derek and Isabel learned they were hollow. I learned I was unbreakable. And that was worth more than any penthouse, any company, any fortune. I poured myself coffee and stood at my windows, watching my city wake up to a new day. A day where I no longer had to hide. A day where the only role I played was myself. And that, finally, was enough. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.